Hey y'all! On Fridays I want to do a Q&A session with Steven every week. So if you go to the CodeSpells Discord, under textual channels you will find question submissions. So use that channel to send me your questions. You can also, if you're a patron, message me through Patreon to get your questions submitted. And I will pick from a random selection of questions each week and ask them to Steven. So here we go. So Steven, the community has lots of questions, and I have like 2 pages here of questions, and I don't think we're going to get through all of it, but I wanted to try to get through as many questions as we could today, and I'm just going to randomly pick from the questions, so they're not necessarily going to go in order. The first question: for the dev tools, what scripting language will be used? Will it be the same as the Rune Lisp? And this is from Angro World Peasant. Thank you for submitting a question.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in a blog post, but I've been meaning to do a more detailed one about some of the dev tools. So I want the Rune language to be sort of isomorphic to what you use to mod, but I mean, if you're doing hardcore modding, it's just too slow to do stuff with runes. So, no, all of my code is going to be open source. It'll be part of the dev tools, and you can use it to build additional dev tools. But that uses Racket. So Racket is a programming language that is a Lisp, and the Rune language is really just a Rune sort of, you can almost think of it like a skin on top of Racket, with some extra fanciness, because some of the runes can be widgets, but really it's just runes, and parentheses are the same as identifiers in parentheses.
So modding is going to be done in the Racket programming language.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Anytime you want to code outside of the game, use Racket. Anytime you want to code inside the game, use runes. But then I mentioned this in a blog post too, but I architected it such that the Racket environment talks to the in-game Unreal environment over a web interface. So if you wanted to write a Python client that did the same thing, then you can now script in Python.
Instead of Racket.
Yeah, so it's not locked into Racket. That's just my favorite language, and that's what I'm the most productive with. And since I'm the one developing the project now, I wanted to go with the tools that will sort of help me bring stuff out to the community the fastest. So
so if someone in the community wanted to write like a Python modding language, then they could theoretically.
Yeah, super easy, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I've got a question from Angalore. How soon will we have access to the authoring tools code?
Well, okay, I guess if you really just mean the code, like negative 15 days, I don't know. I mean, it's been out there in open source. Anyone can access it. It's
on GitHub? On
my GitHub, yeah. There's a package called CodeSpells Runes and one called CodeSpells Server. Now, what I haven't released is the Unreal code, because that contains some plugins that I purchased from the Unreal marketplace, and I can't release those to other people. I'm not allowed to. It would just be wrong for me to do that. So what I'm calling the Unreal client, I'm going to need to bundle up into an executable that is run from the Racket tools, and I made a lot of good progress on that yesterday, and that I do have I have a working build. It was tricky because we're using some let's just say atypical Unreal plugins that did make the build process hard, but I was able to sort of work through the kinks there. So at least for a Windows build, I'm looking at sometime in the next 3 weeks, but I think it'll be sooner than that. I'm hoping I'll have at least a prototype one out by next week. So.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Cool. I think that question from Angalore was probably prior to 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
I think he's already seen the GitHub.
Perfect then,
But just remind everyone what your GitHub username is so that they can find it.
Oh, okay. So I'm doing this all on my personal GitHub account. It's SR Foster. Some of the packages that I use are from our company GitHub, because it was technology we developed for building websites and stuff, sort of more generic Racket technology, and that's ThoughtStem. So SR Foster is where the CodeSpells stuff is. Some of it's out on on ThoughtStim as well. But you don't actually have to worry about that unless you're just curious and like trying to figure out how it all works.
So I have a question here from GhostLayer31. Why is the new game called CodeSpells The Seeker?
Oh, okay. So so that's my proposed working title for the game that I'm developing, or the game that I'm making these authoring tools to help me develop. Mm-hmm. And it's because you play the part of someone who's kind of finds themselves in a world and there's no one there, it's kind of empty, but it's clear that you're following in the footsteps of some wizard who identifies himself only as the Seeker. You come to realize that they were searching for something, and I don't want to spoil exactly what they're searching for. They're searching for something, and as they searched and lost their memory, they wrote down everything they knew about magic, and so you follow in their footsteps and kind of learn what they were after, learn their story, learn their approach to magic, and gain their runes and their powers.
So you have like a story in mind for the new game, and the Seeker is like...
Yeah, the Seeker is part of the story. If it was a book, that would be the title of the book.
Cool. This one's from Angalore. So for this first game, is it going to be a puzzle game or an action game? Do you have kind of like a genre of game you're going for this first game?
For the first release of the first game, I see it more as like a sandbox with a loose story. I feel like one of the things that's always excited people about CodeSpells is being in a sandbox. Mm-hmm. But just having a sandbox can be kind of overwhelming. A little bit. Minecraft is able to sort of do it, but they have a tech tree, and they actually don't have that many recipes and stuff. I mean, with code though, you've just got so many infinite numbers of things that you can create, and if you're new to coding or even just new to CodeSpells, it's like, oh, I'm in a sandbox and I can do infinite things, but I can't think of even one thing to do. So he's like, you need something to kind of help you even explore that infinite sandbox. So both infinite in terms of its terrain, but I meant in that case infinite in terms of its linguistic expressiveness. So you follow in the footsteps of the Seeker, and that gives you runes and spells and stuff. And I hope that the fun thing will be actually casting and building with those things, not so much... I hope the story will be fun and interesting too, but really it's just being there in the world and learning how these runes and spells work. I hope that that's the fun thing about it.
So I have one here from Introspector. Will you revive the CodeSpells YouTube channel? And I can answer that one, yes. We are working on reviving it. Steven's been posting some new development videos. I'm trying to post the interviews that I do, and we just want it to be another way for people to discover the community, discover the project, kind of bring them to the Patreon to help support what we're doing.
A couple days ago, I revived it accidentally because I posted some videos that I just wanted to embed in the blog, and I made them public instead of unlisted. And by the time I realized it, people had already commented and liked, and there's a lot of positive feedback on it. So then when we started chatting, and we're like, we should probably revive the YouTube.
Yeah, we should probably make this official.
But so yes, the answer is yes, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But also, I'm one of my goals with this whole development project is to release some kind of community communication. I'm shooting for every day of every weekday, every work day, so sometimes I miss one or the other, but it's either some video of something I've done or some blog post. And lately, since a lot of what I'm doing is kind of visually appealing, has some nice particle effects in it, that I've been tending towards videos. So.
Okay, so I have another one from Introspector. How exactly does the game connect to the internet and applications besides itself? Of course, there's multiplayer, but are there, for example, runes that can send and receive simple values to and from an API? Could I train a neural network on inputs from wind runes to add AI behaviors to my magic? So maybe, let's break this down.
I'm pretty sure the answer to all of those things is yes, but give me what was the first question?
The first question was, how exactly does the game connect to the internet and applications besides itself?
Yeah, so So there's the CodeSpells client. That's what you see. That's the pretty part of it. That has a web API that the Racket in programming environment connects to and sends kind of directions for, spawn this in the world or change the voxel terrain, kind of the lowest level of the game's API. But the Racket programming environment is just like any programming environment. It's like, think of it like the Python environment or the Node environment or the Haskell environment, Java environment, whatever.
Yeah.
And like any one of those environments, it can do anything at once. So the answer is, yeah, definitely. You can have a rune that connects to an API. You can even have a rune that looks different depending on what it gets back from an API. Like if you've posted on your Twitter recently, it's green, and if you haven't, it's red. Let alone, have it click it and scrape from Twitter or whatever you want. So yes, that's possible. And it's fairly easy to do, I would say, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And then there was a question about the neural network. Remember that one again?
Yeah, could I train a neural network on inputs from wind runes to add AI behaviors to my magic?
Yeah, I'm sure you could. So, okay. So if you're getting input from the game, that wouldn't be getting input from a rune. Well, you might have a rune that spawns some kind of like wind area, let's say. And then that might be piping data out to the Racket runtime environment. Mm-hmm. And as you get data out, yeah, sure, like since now we're just in any old programming environment, if you can figure out how to train a neural net either by using Racket's tools for that or calling into the Python environment to use TensorFlow or something like that, yeah, I mean, you could. And then now that your programming environment has that information, yeah, you could create some kind of, configure some kind of AI that you then spawn in the world. Now, this is all the theoretical space. I don't have wind runes yet, and I don't have that exactly, I certainly don't have any bindings to TensorFlow, but in the theoretical sense, yeah, nothing should stop that kind of that kind of creativity. So that's cool. Good question. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm noticing also a lot of questions about a few questions about the elemental magic.
For sure.
Fire, water, wind, and earth. Mm-hmm. And that was a big part of the Kickstarter. I'm still very excited about that kind of magical system. But I do want to mention that I'm right now developing at a much lower level because although I loved the elemental magic, not everyone did. Not everyone wanted it to be those elements. Some people wanted it to be those plus more, and some people, when we said, hey, water magic is the reason that multiplayer is hard, they're like, get rid of water magic, I don't want that, I would rather have multiplayer. So everyone sort of wants a slightly different thing, so I'm trying to make a sort of set of tools that let us as a community define a variety, different families of magical systems. So I will very likely end up creating some sort of elemental magic, but I hope other people will make other ones that are different.
I know there have been discussions of a lot of different kinds of magic systems, so I think making it extensible and stuff makes a lot of sense.
I don't know, you can sort of see these particles on the screen right now. So those are fire particles that I spawned in, but nothing about them right now is fire-like other than their appearance. It doesn't hurt you, it doesn't catch things on fire, it just looks like fire. So in some sense, maybe for those fantasy nerds out there, it's more like illusion magic. It's not fire magic right now. It's you're just making it look like there is fire there, even though there's in fact not fire there. But you can sort of use the illusion of fire to, add some real flair to your fire magic, or who knows, use it for something else if you have a different system that doesn't divide magic up in that elemental sort of way.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one here from Rooney. What kinds of works will be eligible for the canon? Do they need to be 3D, use the same Lisp, dialect, rune language, and be set in the same lore as the Seeker? Or will canon be more likely disjointed multiverse instead?
So the main thing I'd be looking for with canon is just quality. That's hard to define, and one thing I'm going to be doing before we start taking sort of submissions for canon is to write up a set of guidelines as a draft, and then we'll try to get the community to be involved in kind of working with that draft to figure out what it is we want to be CodeSpells canon. It's going to be tricky to define what we want. But no, not necessarily. Does it have to be 3D? Suppose not.
I think it would be cool to see some 2D games.
I want some 2D games too. Yeah, I don't see why they can't be canon works. Like, we should think of, I think we as a community should think of works as works of art. And when I use the word canon, I'm kind of suggesting they're works of fiction, works of story. So it's just that story needs to sort of cohere with the values of the community. And nothing about story has to be 3D, right? You can tell a story in a 2D game. You can tell a story in a text adventure if you wanted to. So, so I don't think it has to be 3D. I think that's the D-ness of it is just an incidental quality of how you deliver the story. The rune language also doesn't have to be that exact rune language, but I do think for any given work that's canon, it needs to explain itself. Whatever language you are using and whatever language the coding happens in, like why? If you pick JavaScript, I want to know why the wizards in your world are using a language we invented here in the 90s. So I don't know. It's just me.
Yeah.
I think that you should give some attention to that fourth wall and try to make sure that your players, your readers, if we're using the fiction metaphor, your readers feel immersed in what you're doing. You want to have a mod in JavaScript, fine, but if in the game, when they're coding in the game, why is it that language? Runes, I think it's easier to tell that story with, I think, but I don't know. Maybe someone else will come up with a clever other story. Maybe you'll sell me on the fact that Wizards somewhere in the universe use JavaScript for some reason.
Yeah, and just to clarify, like, there's no reason that someone can't build a game that uses JavaScript.
Oh yeah.
It's just that it might not end up.
Oh yeah, do whatever you want. Yeah, exactly. It's like it's the same reason. Like, you can make a game that has giant rubber duckies in it. But just to me, giant rubber duckies just don't feel CodeSpellsy. And I know it's hard to define what CodeSpellsy is. Like, it actually might be pretty tricky. Like, because maybe you could somehow maybe you could make giant rubber duckies feel like they really are CodeSpellsy. And if you do that, that's great. That's awesome.
You know that someone is going to build a giant rubber ducky.
Some probably will. So it's not about any one thing, like this means yes and this means no, but like the cohesiveness of it needs to sort of like feel like CodeSpells. Now, that's going to evolve over time. What feels like CodeSpells is going to depend on what was in the canon before it, and what people are expecting from a wizard game.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for answering some of the community's questions. I'm hoping that we can do this every Friday, just sit down and read some questions from community members. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that was our Q&A session for this Friday. Like I said, I'm hoping that we can do this every Friday. We have tons of questions that we haven't gotten to yet, and feel free to keep submitting questions to me through either Patreon or through the Discord channel. And I hope you all have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Stephen and I won't be working on Monday, but we will be back in business on Tuesday. Bye.